Hello and welcome to a new episode of our daily debate. Today we're talking about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which has been going on for more than 2 years now, and expectations that for more than 3 years now, and expectations for this conflict to go on for a while, as the Kremlin announced that the summit that was supposed to get together Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and his counterpart, Ukrainian counterpart, Zelensky, that was supposed to be in August, was, postponed according to, strong or deep dispute between the two countries. We'll talk today about these updates concerning this crisis and U.S. stance and how far they support Ukraine and do their best to get to a ceasefire and a deal. On the other hand, EU countries, excluded by American President Donald Trump, and how far they can play an effective role in these negotiations. We are joined by Ambassador Ayman Elgammal, former Assistant Foreign Minister and former Ambassador to Ukraine. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We'll start with a phone call. We are joined by Ambassador Midhat Al-Maliki, Mr. Ambassador, thanks for being with us. Good evening. Okay, looks like we missed him. We'll try to get connected again. Let's go on and start with our top stories. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Immigration and Expatriates, Badr Abdelati, participated in the second session of a high-level UN conference over the Palestinian cause on Tuesday. Addressing the session, Abdelati asserted that Israeli policies in the Gaza Strip and West Bank violate human rights and international laws. The top diplomat affirmed Egypt's full support to the Palestinian cause and stressed the significance of establishing an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. On the sidelines of the UN high-level meeting for the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian cause in New York, Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdelati held meetings with the foreign ministers of Spain, Italy and Yemen, as well as Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abulghit. During the meetings, Minister Abdelati confirmed the importance of benefiting from the conference to implement a two-state solution, recognize Palestinian statehood, and regain Palestinian people rights, notably their right of self-determination and holding their independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Welcome back. We are reconnected with Ambassador Midhat Al-Maliki. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Ambassador, what are the latest preparations for the coming Senate elections on August 1st and 2nd, starting abroad?
Well, would you please repeat that? I didn't get the question.
Excuse me, again?
I didn't get the question.
You didn't get the question. I'm asking you about the preparations, the ongoing preparations ahead of the Senate elections that will start abroad on August 1st and 2nd.
You mean the Egyptian elections about the Senate,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Well, actually, as usual, you know, the embassies have been informed about the dates and about the list of their constituencies that's supposed to vote. As you know, the elections are usually 2 days ahead abroad before Egypt. And I believe that in this actually atmosphere, general atmosphere of the elections, I think this time it's getting quite some importance due to the critical position the region is in. So the feeling is that among the Egyptians is that they have to participate, so they have to create a good Senate so that they could get more involved into the life of the Egyptians, which is something everybody is looking for, especially at these critical moments of our nation.
Yes. On another topic, let's discuss the meetings Foreign Ambassador Dr. Badr Abdel-Ati held today on the sidelines of the meetings in the UN. How far these meetings support Palestinians, and how far these meetings reiterate Egyptian stance concerning Palestinians?
Well, actually, as you know, Mr. Badr Abdel-Ati, when he engaged in meetings, the most important thing is to either give more information about an Egyptian position or to clarify some points. And let's not forget that recently there have been some actually enemies, allegations and accusations that Egypt is not doing enough for the Palestinian cause, although this is absurd knowing the position of Egypt, not just since the 7th of October, but even long before that, even before, since 1948, and the creation of the State of Israel and the Nakba that arrived to Palestinians. So I think Mr. Badr Abdel-Ati was more focused on explaining the Egyptian position again, although it was quite clear. But I think one of the most important things also that he was doing is to consolidate the Egyptian position, whether about the help that Egypt is trying to provide to the Palestinians on one hand, or assuming the truce negotiations that have got on hold after the withdrawal of the Israelis and the American delegations from Doha, and Egypt is insisting that these negotiations have to go on until we reach a ceasefire, a durable ceasefire. And most importantly, I think that Egypt needs to also talk about the day after. Let's not forget that there is an Egyptian plan that now is an Arab plan to the reconstruction of Gaza, and we need to gather as much voices and support to this initiative.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador Midhat Al-Maligi, thanks for being with us. Now let's start with our first report and then we continue our debate. Stay tuned.
After more than 3 years of conflict, vital battles persist across multiple sectors. In eastern Ukraine, Russian forces have made limited gains, seizing areas in Sumy Oblast in early June 2025, extending control over around 190 square kilometers and moving dangerously close to Sumy city. These incursions form part of a broader strategy to establish a buffer zone near the border. At the strategic city of Pokrovsk in Donetsk region, a major Russian summer offensive has deployed over 111,000 personnel. Raids persist. Kiev witnessed an airstrike injuring civilians, including a child, while Russia cancelled major naval parades after Ukrainian drone swarms threatened domestic targets. Over 99 drones were down near St. Petersburg alone. Russia continues offensive measures in Sumy and Belgorod regions, with Ukraine pressures allies for additional sanctions and weapon support. Despite deploying advanced guided drones that bypass Ukrainian jamming, Ukrainian defenders have inflicted heavy casualties and slowed Russian advances, keeping total territorial gain under 1% from December 2024 to May 2025, around 968 killed and 4,807 injured. Russia's stockpile of Soviet-era weapons has halved since 2022, forcing reliance on foreign suppliers. North Korea is estimated to have provided over 50% of Russia's explosive materials in 2024, supplemented by Iranian armaments and Chinese industrial support. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues refining use of drones, especially aerial and unmanned ground vehicles, to offset manpower shortages. Specialized robotic units began deployment in early 2025 after trials in 2024. A new CSIS report warns that Russia's economy has become deeply militarized. Defense spending is projected at 6.3% of GDP. Peace talks are ongoing in Istanbul. The third set ended abruptly in July 2025. No ceasefire was achieved, though a prisoner exchange agreement covering 1,200 detainees was secured. Russia refuses Zelensky-Putin summit until expert-level agreement is drafted and continues demanding recognition of Crimea and security constraints on Ukraine.
Welcome back, Mr. Ambassador. Ayman Elgammal, former Assistant Foreign Minister, is our guest. And Mr. Ambassador, thanks for being with us again. And you've been working in Ukraine. You were the former ambassador to Ukraine from 2020 to 2024. So you've been there when the whole thing started. So can we start with a brief historical background of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, thank you for having me in the program. While the conflict started, the current conflict started in 24 February 2022, but the root causes of this conflict goes back to 1990, when the US and Russia were negotiating the unification of Germany. And during that talks between the ministers of foreign affairs and of the US and Mikhail Gorbachev, the US gave its commitment that if Russia agrees on the unification of Germany and Germany becoming part of NATO, that NATO will not expand eastward. Unfortunately, that commitment was never put into written form. It was just a verbal commitment, which was then denied by the US. But recent discoveries, not discoveries, but recent release of classified information from the US so that conversation was actually typed in, and it has that commitment in it. Anyway, since then, in 1999, NATO expanded by 3 countries, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic. In 2004, it increased by 7 other countries.
Every time it gets closer to the door gates of
and
Russia.
By 2021, it had already incorporated more than 14 countries. And it was in 2008, in the NATO summit, that they extended an invitation to Ukraine and Georgia to join NATO. And that summit was attended by Vladimir Putin. And he expressed his refusal of such an invitation. And
that was in 2008.
2008. And
yes.
4 months after that conference, war started between Georgia and Russia, because Russia made it very clear that they will not accept any joining of such two nations to NATO. Because that will become an existential threat to Russia. If you have weapons, NATO weapons in Ukraine and Georgia, then you have already encircled Russia from all its neighbors by NATO countries, which is unacceptable to Russia, and it was made very clear. And since then there was the 2004 soft coup in the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. Which managed to bring a president who was amenable to the West countries. Then that president was defeated in 2009, and Yanukovych came as president of Ukraine, and he was more keen to have a neutral Ukraine and not join the NATO, and more appease to Russia. In 2014, there was the second revolution in Ukraine, and that revolution toppled Yanukovych and brought a government that was actually formed by the US and the EU. And that is when it started. The Russian attacked and got hold of Crimea in 2014, and then they helped the separatists in Donbass and Luhansk to start their separatist movement. And since then there was the 2014-2015 war, and then there was the Minsk agreement that was supervised by Germany, France and the UK, and it made a peace between Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately, the Minsk agreement was not implemented. Then there was the Minsk II agreement, which was not implemented also. And then NATO started training forces in Ukraine. 10,000 troops were
sent to Ukraine.
No, were trained. 10,000 Ukrainian troops were trained by NATO over 8 years. So that 80,000 troops were trained in the between 2007 and between 2017 and 2022. And then NATO started providing, US and NATO started providing advanced weapons to Ukraine. And all of these decisions, all of these actions were perceived by the Russians as being an existential threat to them. Then came Zelensky as president in 2019. He came on the platform that he is a peaceful man, want to have peace with Russia, want to have good relations with Russia. Unfortunately, he changed his stance in 2001 and started being more appeased to the, joining the EU, joining NATO, and started taking actions towards that aim. And in that year also came the Biden administration, and the Biden administration was involved from 2014. The file of Ukraine was the purview of Biden when he was vice president. So when he became president, he already knew all the aspects of that, and he had a hawkish stand towards Russia. And this is how things started deteriorating from 2001 until 2000.
So Russia saw it as an existential threat.
Exactly.
To it, and Ukraine, I don't know whether they were not aware of that. This is one question. And
the problem is you cannot say you are not aware, because Vladimir Putin made it very clear, particularly in December 2021.
What about EU countries?
2 months before the war. The problem is that during that period, the NATO and stance, US, NATO, EU, all of these countries, the stance was that Russia is too weak to do anything about it.
Okay.
So that was the
So let's take the chance.
so
take the advantage.
let's push and see what they do, because they believe that Russia will not put itself into a conflict. And unfortunately, because that was what Russia perceived as they are being ignored, and they did a warning. They even sent a letter to all the members of NATO saying that if Ukraine joins NATO, that will be an existential threat, and that is unacceptable. And they completely ignored them, and the reply was, NATO is an open organization, and each country has the right to choose its path and its security guarantees. And that was then that started the events that culminated by first recognizing the separatist Donbass and Luhansk, then signing a defense agreement, and then the attack that started in 24 February.
So that's more than 3 years into war now between Russia and Ukraine, and American President Donald Trump promised before coming into office that he can end the war in like no time, a week I think he said. And obviously after being in office for almost more than a year now or so, was not able or is not able to do so. And there is an ultimatum from US to Russia and Ukraine, ultimatum of 50 days to in order to come to a deal. Why do you think the American president was not able to fulfill his promise? Why wasn't he able to have that leverage, if we can say, over the Russian president Vladimir Putin he thought he would have?
Let's start by saying that in the progress of the war during the 3 years, there has been different moments, let's say. The start of the war, where Russia almost encircled Kiev, and then there was the peace talks that started in March 2022, 1 month after the start of the war, and they almost reached an agreement in that war. And to make this negotiation succeed, the President Putin declared that he's withdrawing his forces from around Kiev as a sign of goodwill. The Ukrainian used that withdrawal to launch a counteroffensive. So they launched a counteroffensive and managed to regain a huge amount of the land that was occupied by Russia in the first months. And that counteroffensive finished almost October 2022. During that part, the Russian had the possibility to regain its foot in the battlefield, had its defensive line, and managed to stop the advance of the Ukrainian but it has under it the control of 4 different regions of Ukraine, which is Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And he had almost the full control of Luhansk and Donetsk. Zaporizhia and Kherson had almost like 40% of the... Anyway, after that, there was like a stalemate for 6 months because the Ukrainian had almost used most of their weapons and in their counteroffensive, so they waited for another 4 to 5 months for the NATO and the US to provide them with tanks and all types of weapons to be able to do another counteroffensive, because at that time the notion was that Ukraine can actually win that war and force the Ukrainian...
Okay, but why do you think the American president wasn't able to seal a deal so far?
Because the tide turned.
Okay.
And the Russian took the offensive since end of 2023 until now. So since then, the tide turned, and the Ukrainian has the advance in all...
You mean Russians?
Sorry, Russian has the advance in all aspects of the battlefield. And they have regained a lot of the land they lost during the initial counteroffensive by Ukraine. So now, when Trump came, it was a different scenario. The Ukrainian are on the defensive, the Russian are on the offensive, they are gaining...
But we saw, but the whole world watched the meeting of the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in Washington with Donald Trump, and he was asking clearly Ukraine for concessions.
Yes. Trump, when he came to power, he discovered, or he changed the notion of the US position from that Ukraine can win this war to the notion that it is unperceived that Ukraine will win this war by force, and that there are new realities on the ground, which is the recognition that we need to recognize Russian control of certain areas to be able to reach a peace agreement. And he made the first meeting with with Russia and the US in Saudi Arabia, and during that meeting they recognized what the Russians were saying, which is the security concerns of Russia, which is something that nobody recognized before. And unfortunately, while they provided a very, very good deal for the Russian,
why didn't the Russian accept the deal?
They said, we will recognize your control of Crimea de jure, means that it's finished, and then we will recognize your control of the other 4 regions only de facto, which means it is not legally recognized, and Ukraine will never join the NATO.
But there was no commitment from the American side concerning that Ukraine will never join the NATO.
No, that was a commitment.
It was a written commitment?
Yeah, it was in the peace, let's say, the peace deal that the American presented to Russia.
Okay.
The problem was not that. The problem was that Ukraine and the EU came out refusing to accept that deal.
Russia accepted that deal?
Russia did not accept. But before Russia even accepted, they refused, and they came up with a counter proposal, which was the 30-day ceasefire, which, of course, Russia refused to accept, because they said we could not accept a ceasefire, because ceasefire will let the Ukrainian army get some rest and will replenish its weapons, and will be able to defend better. While I'm now having the upper hand, I'm not letting them have this.
Well, that takes us to the European stance concerning negotiations going on between Russia and Ukraine to reach a ceasefire and seal a deal. We'll get to that point, but first let's go and watch this report and stay tuned, please.
By mid-2025, U.S. diplomacy evolved from a forceful mediator to a more transactional partner, offering ceasefires and aid but prioritizing bilateral engagement with Russia. Europe, in contrast, has asserted itself as the enduring strategic actor, enforcing sanctions, demanding Ukraine's inclusion, and coordinating peace frameworks through Weimar Plus and the London Summit. This divergence underscores a fragile transatlantic relationship, one side pushing for speed and compromise, the other stewarding principles and regional sovereignty. The coming months will be pivotal, defining whether a durable, inclusive resolution to the war can emerge or whether geopolitical fault lines deepen. Some European officials warned that a US-Russia-only agreement risks undercutting sanctions regimes and undermining European energy and defense strategy. The Trump administration in February 2025 initiated a breakthrough of sorts, direct peace talks with Russian officials in Riyadh and Jeddah, notably excluding both Ukraine and European partners. A high-level US-Russia team, including US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary, outlined 4 guiding principles: normalizing diplomatic missions, appointing a peace negotiation team, exploring future economic cooperation, and maintaining ongoing engagement. The U.S. also signaled a willingness to support limited Russian territorial retention, deeming full Ukrainian territorial recovery unrealistic and approached sharply at odds with Kiev's stated objective. In early March 2025, U.S. and Ukrainian representatives agreed to a U.S.-brokered proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire. In tandem, the U.S. lifted a pause on military and intelligence aid previously imposed after a public dispute between Trump and Zelensky in Washington. However, by May, the U.S. State Department declared a shift. Washington would no longer act as lead mediator unless Ukraine and Russia presented concrete peace proposals independent. The U.S. ambition thus evolved towards supporting diplomacy, imposing pressure, and proposing deadlines rather than managing negotiations. In late July, U.S. Secretary Rubio emphasized that Trump was losing patience with Russia's inaction and reinforced a 50-day ultimatum for Moscow to agree to a peace deal before further sanctions would be triggered. European leaders have repeatedly reaffirmed unwavering support to Ukraine militarily, financially, and politically, while imposing broad, escalating sanctions on Russia, including targeting energy exports.
So, European stance concerning these conflicts, obviously supporting Ukraine till the very end, according to the report. And what about diplomatic efforts, European diplomatic efforts, and a sanction-driven approach to end this war and conflict?
Well, the EU felt isolated when the Russian and the U.S. met in Riyadh, because that in Saudi Arabia, because that meeting the EU did not participate and Ukraine did not participate. And that was an alarming point for them, because you are not talking only about Ukraine. It's from the perspective of the EU. It's the EU is under threat by Russia. It's not only Ukraine. That Ukraine is only the first step. After that, they will expand towards other countries. So they took stronger measures, and they actually, if you were following up, you find that almost most of the European countries went and visited the US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, and all of them were trying to convince Trump to take a more stronger stance toward Russia. And because Trump let's say system of negotiation is more transactional, while the EU system of negotiation is more principled. So there was a clash between the two, because US wanted to finish this war because they had other thing in mind, trade with Russia, and that will generate income for the US, and they came on a platform of peace in the world and tried to settle most of the conflicts in the world. Anyway, the EU took a stronger stance. They refused the first proposal made by the US. Ukraine refused it, the EU refused it. They came up with an alternative, which was the ceasefire, which was refused by Russia, because for them it doesn't add anything. It just gives a relief to the Ukrainian. Then the US started looking at what am I going to gain from this, and they made the deal for the earth minerals with Ukraine. Once they made this deal, which they pressured Ukraine to do, it became an interest for them to maintain Ukraine and try to save it from the Russia, because the scenario that...
But after the deal, Ukraine gains nothing.
No, the deal was the support of the US. They started, because they stopped the arms. After the deal, they started giving back the arms.
Okay.
So that was the first time they stopped the arms, until they got the deal.
But that was funded by EU countries.
No, that was before the funding by the EU. Then following that, they started again negotiation, and then they created the new peace deal, which was a ceasefire supervised by EU, and then they created, the EU created something called the...
So I have a minute left. So what are the conditions Russia asking for, and on the other hand, guarantees, security guarantees asked by Ukraine? I have 1 minute.
The Russian condition is complete recognition of the territories currently held by Russia.
Okay.
Neutralization of neutral state of Ukraine without joining NATO, and demilitarization of its military, which is unacceptable to Ukraine or the EU.
What about Ukraine?
Ukraine wants security guarantees similar to what the NATO can provide, which is if it is attacked again, then the NATO countries will attack Ukraine, and that has never been given. All the security guarantees that was given are more towards aid and providing military assistance.
In 30 seconds, prospects of reaching a deal?
Very slim prospect, because Russia still see that Ukraine has not reached the point where they are accepting its condition, and until they do that, they will not relieve it.
So it looks like this war is prompted to go on for a while, maybe a year or so, or maybe some months. Let's wait and see. Ambassador Ayman Elgammal, former Assistant Foreign Minister and Egyptian former Ambassador to Ukraine, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned on the Nile TV International. I'm Mohammed Abdel Menaim.